Greetings and salutations. Today we'll be covering the vending machine murders, otherwise known as the Paraquat Murders. Now, to understand these murders, we're going to have to understand where it happened. Japan. And Japan is known for a lot of unique things, from food, amazing architecture, anime, samurai, automobile brands, Toyota, and the like. However, Japan is also very well known for its love of vending machines. This is to the point the term Jidohanbaki has become somewhat synonymous with areas of Japan. While they are not unique to Japan, Japan has an astonishing number of vending machines, and the ubiquity of them being almost everywhere, from the largest cities to the smallest towns, intrinsically ties vending machines with Japan to some extent. In Japan, vending machines come in a variety of shapes, sizes. They also come in a variety of what they actually dispense. However, regardless of the machine, they all function under the same basic premise. Insert a payment, select an item, and after a few mechanical steps, you receive said item. In the year 1985, these same machines were tied to a series of events that ended with the indiscriminate poisoning and killings of about 10 to 12 individuals, and further poisoning anywhere from 20 to 35 more individuals. April 30th, 1985. In Fukuyama, a man in his late 40s stopped by a vending machine in order to purchase a drink. When looking at the vending machine, he found the bottle sitting on top of the vending machine. It was a bottle of Vitamin C, which at the time was a rather popular carbonated drink, which claimed to be an energy health drink. After a cursory inspection of the bottle, he would take the bottle home with him and consume it later, along with the bottle he originally purchased. Now, it must be noted that at the time, Vitamin C had been running a campaign where with every bottle of their drink, there would be a chance for a second bottle to be dispensed for free. Meaning the individual who took this bottle likely believed someone had gotten a second bottle and decided to pay it forward by allowing somebody else to have it. Soon after drinking the Vitamin C, he was beset with a rapidly developing illness, and he would head to the hospital. His symptoms would begin with bouts of nausea, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Then this would be followed by confusion, muscle weakness, fatigue, and seizures, along with respiratory failure. On the second day, the doctors would notice that he had been developing significant severe scarring in his lungs, and his kidneys, along with his liver, had ceased to function correctly. On the third day of fighting the sudden onset illness, the man would unfortunately pass away. It was May 2nd, 1985. However, the question on what had caused his illness still lingered, even though the condition was quite recognizable as that of poisoning. This led doctors to take samples of his vomit and test it. This is when they suddenly noticed a dangerously high concentration of paraquat, a herbicide, which was first introduced to Japan in 1962. When authorities would go over his recounting of his final day of work, they would notice his statements of having gotten a drink and having found the second drink. This led authorities to take a closer look at the drink, and what they found was that the drink had been laced with paraquat. And the man, after having died in the hospital, his death would be ruled as acute paraquat poisoning. When ingested, paraquat can destroy the body over a period of several hours to even several days, depending on the concentration. Unfortunately, as soon as the poison makes its way to the kidneys, the victim will be unable to have the poison removed from their system, and it will circulate through the body much quicker. Paraquat poisoning can cause internal organs to shut down one at a time. Once the poison travels to the lungs, it will severely impact the oxygen saturation, and it will damage the lungs drastically, even if somehow the patient is saved. They will go through a medical condition called pulmonary fibrosis. In a matter of hours, the paraquat will cause worsening and worsening lung damage as the tissue hardens, which would prevent it from expanding, making it difficult to breathe while the lungs begin to fill with fluid, causing the victim to essentially drown. Later, on September 11th, more than 150 miles from the first incident, a 52-year-old Haru Otsu was on his way home from a long day of fishing and stopped by a vending machine in order to quench the thirst that the fishing had built up. He purchased a bottle of Vitamin C from a machine in Osaka, specifically from Isumasano, Osaka. Having purchased the bottle of Vitamin C and hearing his drink plop into the dispenser section of the vending machine, he reached in and was surprised to have found not just the drink he had ordered, but another drink had been in the machine's dispensing slot. Assuming that he had just had a stroke of good luck, he took it with him and halfway through drinking the second bottle, on his way back home, he began to feel ill, and his symptoms started with dizziness. Believing something might have been up with the drink, he closed the bottle and made certain to have it with him when he rushed off to the local hospital. The following night, he stopped breathing. After testing, it was found that the bottle had been tainted with paraquat. The following day, at an estimated 112 miles from the second location, a 22-year-old university student purchased a bottle of real gold from a vending machine in Matsusaka. Once he completed his purchase, he had found another bottle of real gold waiting in the dispensing slot. After being rushed into the hospital, the 22-year-old would end up being the third victim to die due to poisoned soda on September 14th. Only 3 days after the second victim had fallen ill. However, unlike the other poisonings, this case was a case of diquat poisoning. As an aside, the drink he was poisoned by was produced by Coca-Cola. It must be noted that diquat is also nearly an identical herbicide to paraquat. This had caused the authorities to begin to raise concerns about what was going on. In September, 5 individuals would die from poisoned soda. This would cause the death toll to tick up to a total of 6, causing this story to spread like wildfire, not just within Japan, but internationally as well. It was only after a brief hiatus that the attacks would resume. Unfortunately for all those involved, they would resume on October 5th of 1985. October's attacks would appear to be more organized and deliberate. Each appeared to be spaced out and timed out to within about a week from each other, using the same exact soda and poison concoction. The final 2 attacks that would be attributed to the suspect would happen on the 7th and the 17th of November, once more using the poisoned Oranaman C bottles, which had been tainted with lethal paraquat. The last officially recognized victim would be a young female high school student by the name of Tsuchiya. Strangely enough, the government had to go all out and place signs telling people not to take drinks that had been left behind. It's important to note that the attacks seemed to span the entire country, or much of it, in Imadate, Miyakono, Hibikuno, Gonso, Kashira, and Miyagi Prefecture, along with Kawachinaganoshi, Uwara, Kodamagan, and Kanazawa. Now, if you look at the distance between all the incidents from the 2nd to the 5th, you get 190 miles being covered between all of them. When looking at the occurrences of the poisonings, a pattern can be noted. There are 2 major clusters, with one being in the Tokyo area and the other being in the Osaka area, with the rest being spread out throughout the wider area of Japan. Now, this is important because this distance was covered in a relatively short amount of time. It would mean that the mad poisoner likely had a job that allowed them to move about throughout such a wide area without drawing attention to themselves. This could potentially point towards the perpetrator's job being that of a trucker. However, one must also consider that the individual could have been some sort of sales rep, or even an organized group operating in a similar way to the one which would later perpetrate the Tokyo subway sarin attacks. Multiple suspects would also help account for the slight differences in a few of the drinks that were used for the poisonings, and the one differentiation between poisons. It must be noted that the perpetrator or perpetrators all left drinks where there would be no CCTV cameras or witnesses, allowing them to covertly do their actions. There was also the fact that many of the vending machines, if not most of them, were in the areas near offices, specifically offices known for mostly male workers, aka salarymen. There are some individuals who suggest that the killer had been targeting men, and they stopped suddenly because they had unintentionally killed a girl, leading to them ending all their killings after the girl was killed. There are others who believe that the killer could have been a university student and had been on break from university, or that their schedule allowed them to travel in order to commit the killings. Now, the most renowned suspect was the Monster with 21 Faces, which was an alias used by a group responsible for the blackmail letters in the Glecko Moringa case in Japan, which occurred in 1984. Given the similarities of lacing food with poison, however, the lack of letters makes it unlikely that it was them, though it could also have been that the targets were the drink manufacturers themselves, who were advertising their drinks as being healthy drinks or health drinks, regardless of how questionable the claims of them being healthy actually were. Following the deaths, the companies who made Oranaman C would go on to make a public statement that they would be making all their bottles tamper-proof proof, which they would continue to do to this day. It must be noted that Japan stopped all sales of 24% paraquat in 1986, leading to a complete end of cases tied to this. The killings being attributed to the suspect, totaling 12 victims killed by paraquat. These victims would seemingly have no connection between each other, making any further investigation into the case incredibly difficult, leaving it as a cold case. Strangely enough, this case is very reminiscent of the Tylenol poisonings which occurred in 1982 within Chicago. Said cases involved Tylenol bottles being tampered with, then placed back on store shelves of supermarkets within the Chicago area. It is so similar that there is a potential for the Japanese crime to have been a copycat crime. The Chicago Tribune would go on to report that experts in various fields speculated that the crimes might be a manifestation of Japan's orderly, intense, work-oriented society. Hiroko Ayo, a Tokyo professor of criminal sociology, said, "It is not uncommon for Japanese who live under tremendous pressure, both on the job and in overcrowded communities, to let out their frustrations by hurting someone, potentially insinuating that the crimes were done out of an attempt to relieve frustration by the criminal." Additionally, Sumsu Oda, a mental health specialist at the University of Tsukuba, suggested that the crimes may have been motivated by adrenaline rushes and a sense of superiority in imagining victims struggling. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations on this case ran out in the year 2000, and even with a change in the statute of limitations law within Japan, only murder cases post-1994 would fall under this consideration of a change in law, meaning this case will most certainly remain unsolved. If you remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.